Hey everybody, so I know you all have waited long enough, and here goes the True to the Game Part 3 film discussion. I want to just alert you now, there will be spoilers, so spoiler alert. If you have not seen the film, go ahead and stop this video, come back to it after you have watched the film. The film is currently streaming on various platforms. While it is still in theaters, you can watch it from home. One of those platforms is Amazon Prime Video. I have a paid link in the description box, just meaning that if you click on that link and sign up to watch the film on Amazon Prime, I will get a kickback for it, seeing as I am an Amazon associate. Without further ado, here goes the discussion. So I want to first and foremost say my expectations with this film was completely different than what I received. Now, I'm not going to say the film was not good. I thought the film was done really well, and it definitely managed to tie up loose ends, maybe rather quickly. But it did tie up some loose ends, and I'm just curious to know. Comment below, what did you all think as far as your expectations going into this film and what you received by the end of the film? Was looking forward to seeing Quadir avenge his own murder, and I know it was Jarrell who did it, and technically he avenged it by the end of part two. But for some reason, I don't know, I guess it happened so quickly that in my mind, moving even into part three, I was still expecting to see Quadir kick butt. Like, I was expecting to see Quadir with an S on his chest, and he was gonna be going around saving everybody. Gina, Bria, Gygat, Suge. But that's not how this film went. And I feel like it doesn't make this film wrong because it did not meet the expectations that I had. I don't feel like it made the film any less enjoyable. I just think in my mind, for some reason, I was going in a whole nother direction. And that probably has to do with the fact that in my mind, I am still stuck on True to the Game books written by Terry Woods, the author Terry Woods. I'm still stuck on that. So it was completely different than what I expected. However, it was still really enjoyable. In fact, in my opinion, this particular film, it allowed the character Quadir to be a little more laid back. In fact, in the end, we can clearly see that he isn't even the one that saves his own life in the end. It is actually Gina who saves his life in the end. So it's, again, I expected it to be more Quadir carrying the weight of this particular last film on his shoulders, but his character for the most part was chill in this film, and it actually was Gina who left LA. So let me go back to the beginning. We have the film. It opens up. We got Gina and Quadir in LA. Gina's upset with Quadir because of the fact that he is letting her know this whole entire time he has been alive. He led her and many others to believe that he was dead. Gina's like, do you know what I went through in part two film? And if this was the book, she probably would be like, do you know what I went through in part two book, or whatever the case may be? So she's highly upset with him, and Quadir tries to explain to her why he did it, why only his mother knew he was alive, as well as Carlos, but also Carlos, who we may remember from the first film, who went on to the second film, and then we saw him in the third film. Carlos was there for Quadir. He assisted him with disappearing, doing this disappearing act and pretending like Quadir was dead. But it was a point where Carlos said, you know what, if you're going to continue to chase Gina, which occurred in part two film of Quadir driving around in that black Mercedes and following Gina to make sure she was okay, and ultimately he comes to her rescue in the end. Well, Carlos allegedly had men already following Gina, but Quadir understood that Gina was getting too close to Jarrell, and he was rightfully so, right? We saw the end of part two film. Quadir was telling Carlos, like, hey, I'm not going to stand back anymore and stay in the shadows. She's going to know I'm alive and I'm going to protect her. And Carlos like, well, if you do this, I can't help you anymore. And Quadir's like, it is what it is. So I think that was the end of their professional relationship as well as personal relationship. But I thought it was pretty cool that Carlos had Quadir's back for like all of these films. Like, for a moment in part two, I honestly thought Carlos was kind of shady. Like, it just was a look that he gave. But it come to find out he had Quadir's back the entire time, and he was looking out for Quadir and Gina. But Gina, none of that, appeased Gina. Even though Quadir was trying to explain that it was for the protection of them all, and I can't blame Gina because she still got her butt kicked in the end by Jarrell, unfortunately, in the second film. But Quadir ultimately did come to her rescue. What I thought was interesting is Quadir did mention a nurse. Okay, he mentioned a nurse that came to his aid, but in the book, the third book, when Quadir speaks of this nurse, we learned that Quadir actually had a love affair with this nurse. Kind of like how Gina had a relationship with Jarrell in this second film, but also the second book. Now, y'all know I'm about to go there. Y'all already know I'm about to go there because I don't even want to wait to the end to discuss this. I am about to go there. I know in my book discussion, and I've said this in a YouTube short that I've done. I know in my book or some video I've done, I know in my book discussion, I talked a lot about how in the second book, okay, the second True to the Game book, not the film, the second True to the Game book, completely different from the film. But one thing remains consistent. There was a relationship between Gina and Jarrell. In the book, however, written by Terry Woods, Gina and Jarrell were intimate together, not even just on one occasion. I'm not certain how many, maybe two or three, as the book alluded to, but they were physically intimate. So therefore, Gina learned later on in that book that she was actually pregnant. However, at the very end of the book, like the end of the second film, Gina was beaten very badly by Jarrell. And so by the time the third book, we had the third book, it was written in the third book that when Gina thought she was going to go abort Jarrell's baby, especially since she figured out who Jarrell was and that Quadir was alive, she learned that she had lost the baby. And I guess it was because Jarrell had beat her so badly. Unfortunately, she lost the baby. Well, it was fortunate for her because she didn't want it anyway, but she had lost the baby. So a lot of people went in on me on my book discussion saying this is not what happened in the movie and stuff like that. I'm like, people, it is the book discussion. How many times do I have to say disclaimer? The book is going to be different from the film, obviously, but it still did happen in the book nonetheless, even if it didn't happen in the film. However, we do see in the second film, Gina and Jarrell hook up kind of in a way like when they were on the boat in the second film. It was alluded to in some way that her and Jarrell were getting ready to possibly spend the rest of that evening together. And I'm not saying that necessarily they got to be physical to do that, but that's, in my opinion, what it was alluded to. So come to the ending of True to the Game 3, we see Quadir and Gina get married. And once they got married, we see that Gina reveals that she has a huge baby bump and she's rubbing her stomach. And there are literally flashbacks to her and Jarrell kissing and possibly going even further, based off of what you saw. Okay. So they're trying to hint to something. The film is trying to hint to something. Now I'm gonna say this: you could take that one or two ways. You can take it as she's rubbing her belly and flat and having these flashbacks to Jarrell, insinuating that that is indeed Jarrell's baby. Or you can take that as she's doing all of that and having these flashbacks because she's questioning the paternity of her child and going back to thinking, well, I was with Jarrell and I was with Quadir, so I'm uncertain of who's the father. So the way they wrote that and they shot that scene, I thought was pretty clever because you can literally go different ways with that. Like you don't have to necessarily think, oh, this is Jarrell's baby. Like it could really be either or you could just think like, oh, this could be Jarrell's baby. But if you go back to the book, then in the book, it was indeed Jarrell's baby, but she lost the baby. So that she never even made it to the wedding at the end of the book 3, because there was a wedding at the end of the book 3. She never made it to the wedding pregnant. At that point, she didn't have Jarrell's baby anymore. Actually, in the book, if we want to go into the book a little further too, uh it is also known that Quadir had a child of his own. So at their wedding, Quadir's child was there. So that again, the book is not the same as the film, y'all. And I truly prefer the book more, but I get it. It would be a lot, and the movie would be hecka long if they incorporated a lot of the main storylines into the film. Nonetheless, getting back to the film, so I had to jump to the end because I just wanted to put that out there. But for the most part, I felt like Quadir in this film was a lot more laid back and not as active as I would have liked to see. And I want you all to let me know what you think about that. I personally felt like the character Quadir was a lot more laid back. It was more of him explaining himself. It was also more of his mom telling him like, "Hey, sit where you're at. You're not going anywhere." And him allowing Gina to just kind of go off on her own to deal with their family business, to deal with her family's business, which is what she did. She left LA to go back to Philly because her cousin Bria called her in regards to the fact that she was in trouble, and Salim and Terrell were after her, as well as Suge and possibly Got Get, due to the fact that in the second film we see that Suge and Bria, as well as Aaliyah, who is played by the actress and entertainer Little Mama, they all robbed Jarrell's shipment. So now they're targets. And Titus, who we also know from like the first film into the second film and now the third film, he's an informant for this detective by the name of Detective Joe in this film. But Titus has been around, and Titus witnessed the fact in the second film that Suge and Aaliyah and Bria were all a part of hijacking Quadir's shipment, or excuse me, Jarrell's shipment. So with that being said, Bria was scared and she called Gina and asked her to come back. And Gina's like, I got to go back, Quadir. My cousin is in trouble. And Quadir wanted to go, but Gina was like, no, you stay here because, if you go back, they're going to kill you for sure. So at least with me, they don't suspect anything with me. But if they see you, then they're going to recognize it's you and they're going to kill you. So in order to protect Quadir and keep his identity, as it was, which is him being dead technically, he stayed. And of course, he had his mother too, convincing him like, hey, I did all of this for you. I lost my son once. You're just going to go back and get yourself killed. And so, I mean, I get it. I get the storyline. And again, I don't feel like just because the film didn't meet my expectation that it still wasn't enjoyable. It was, but I really, really would have loved to have seen more of Quadir in action. Instead, I feel like the main backbone of this film was mainly, in my opinion, let me know what you all think in the comment section. What do you think? I think the main characters of this film really had to do with Bria, Dalvin, Titus, Detective Joe, Salim, and Terrell. I really feel like those characters were like the main focus of this film. And I feel like Detective Joe, who was played by Darius McCray did an excellent job as Detective Joe. He stole the attention in this film, in my opinion. I don't think there is not one other character in this film other than Titus, because it is Titus and Detective Joe's banter that, in my opinion, that made this story very strong, the backbone of the story very strong, because of how well they did as it being the dynamic of the detective and the informant, and the disrespect that the detective has with the informant, and the pressure that the detective was putting on the informant, because the detective had, for whatever reason, I don't know if he owed people or what they were alluding to in the film, but clearly Detective Joe needed the money from these street criminals, okay, street employees. And Titus was like his key to that. Titus was the key to getting to the money. And it was so much pressure on Titus because Titus had to work with the detective, but at the same time, he had to make sure that Salim did not know he was a snitch, as well as Terrell not knowing he was a snitch. So the way the dynamic between those two, and the anxiety, the drama, the disrespect, the dialogue between those two, I really feel like made this film strong. That's just my opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section. And then you have Bria and Dalvin, who I also felt like took up a lot of the screen time as well. And I feel like in the end, y'all let me know what y'all think on this too. I feel like in the end, Bria and Dalvin could definitely carry on true to the game. And I think someone else mentioned this too, that Bria and Dalvin could definitely carry on true to the game. If they ever decide to do like some sort of spin-off to the film and to the trilogy, they could use Dalvin and Bria, because in the end, they definitely gave me Quadir and Gina vibes. And I'm like, hold on, when did Dalvin become a face? If you think about heels and face in wrestling, heel being the bad guy, face being the good guy. Well, Dalvin was a heel for certain in True to the Game Part 2. He tried to drug Bria and take her back to Salim because he was so afraid. He was a little punk. He was so afraid that Salim would kill him if he did not deliver Bria to him. But suddenly in True to the Game Part 3, at first it seemed like Dalvin was still on that because he was being pressured by Salim to bring Bria to him. And Salim kept giving him chances. But then suddenly Dalvin is like, Bria, I love you. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Like, what? You were just trying trying to drug her in the second film and deliver her on a platter to Salim, and now you're protecting her. And it's like in the end, they kill Salim and they ride off in the sunset together with Salim's shipment and was with Salim's money, as well as his vehicle. And that in my mind, because of the way it ends like that, I'm thinking, especially since it was after credits, I'm thinking, oh, that lets us know there could possibly be some sort of spinoff to this featuring Bria and Dalvin, if that's what the people want. If that's what the people want, you have got to deliver. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, they're the younger Quadir and Gina, basically. And meanwhile, Quadir and Gina, they'll go on to live happily ever after with their questionable paternity of their child and whatnot. So I don't know. That's just my opinion. But I was like, when did Dalvin switch it up on him? I don't know. I guess they, wrote it how they wrote it. I guess it's believable. Another disheartening thing, the deaths. So we know Titus is killed by Suge, but unfortunately, Suge, for those of you who may not remember, that is the character that is played by the actress Vivica Fox. Suge is killed by Titus at the same time. And also in that scene, before Titus is actually killed by Suge, we see that he has an exchange with the actor Omar Gooding. I was like, oh snaps, that's Omar Gooding. But anyway, I was very sad because at this point, Suge and Gaget and Gina and Quadir, they all were pretty tight. Suge was there for them. They all were pretty tight, but where Suge messed up was in True to the Game Part 2 when she got Bria involved, I would say rather she allowed Bria to be involved in hijacking Jarrell's shipment, which caused the whole domino effect of them even being targets of Salim and Terrell and Jarrell. So that whole situation caused Gina to fall out with Suge and Gaget to fall out with Suge when Suge went to confess to Gaget that her and Bria had stole from this big time gangster, aka Jarrell, and now they were all going to be targets, including Gaget. And in my opinion, that was one of the most emotional scenes, besides the fact where Gina learns that Gaget was murdered in their apartment. That was another very emotional scene, and really did bring me to tears because, again, this is a character we've known since the first True to the Game. So, and let me slow down with this one. First and foremost, it was when Suge and Gaget had their dialogue at Gaget's home, and Suge is having to confess to her that she allowed Bria to go along with her. And even though Bria says she grown, etc., etc., Suge is still the older one and the one that the family is entrusting Bria to at times. And it's like she betrayed their trust because she allowed Bria to be a part of some type of street activity such as that would put her life in danger. So when Suge starts confessing to Gaget, like, listen, I did this, I did that, and Gaget is like, you're no longer family. You would have never allowed that to happen. You got both my babies mixed up in this. That was a very emotional scene. That was a very emotional scene because it's like, you could tell Suge loves Gaget and she looks up to her, but you can also tell that Suge knew in her heart that Gaget was not going to leave that apartment. Gaget was ride or die. She was not about to leave that apartment. She was heavily spiritual prayed up, and she said, listen, if it's my time to go, it is my time to go, but you got to go. You got my babies in danger, you got to go. And that was sad. I'm like, I get it spiritually. She's saying she's not leaving her house. But I was like, dang, Gaget, like, I get it. You saying God got you, and though you may walk through the shadows of, all that stuff, don't you think God would want you to leave? Like, just go on vacation, go to the casino, go somewhere where Salim and Terrell can't find you. Like, why you gotta stay there? Why you got to? But that's just how Gaget was. And sure enough, she stayed, and we saw the scene where Salim came in. And I'm grateful that they did not include like any actual footage of Salim murdering her, because we don't need to see that. We understood when we saw him come in with that hammer, or he broke in with that hammer, and we see the look on Gaget's face of pure fright, being frightened. We knew what was coming next. But geez, I thought when Gina walked into the apartment hallway, I just thought in my mind for some reason I felt like it was going to be Salim. I don't know why. I just kind of felt like maybe Gaget had a gun and she just shot Salim up. So when Gina would run into the apartment and she'd be all hysterical, she'd realize she'd see Gaget standing in the corner having coffee, like, baby, they can't touch me. I've been around too long. But no, it was indeed Gaget who was murdered. And the way that Gina was crying. And if you all don't know, there was an officer standing at the door keeping Gina from going into the crime scene. And as Gina was breaking down because it was Guy Gett who was murdered, that officer is actually the producer Manny Haley's wife, Yolanda Haley. So normally we would see Manny Haley pop up in some of these films, as we've seen him pop up in True to the Game too. He was also in Dutch. He had his cameo in Dutch as well. So normally we see that it was Manny Haley, but I guess he said this time he gonna let some other people get some shine. So Manny Haley was is his wife. We saw make a cameo appearance, and she is the officer that held Gina back from going in to see Guy Get. Also, of course, we know Bria is played by Manny Haley's daughter, so I think that's pretty cool. Keeping in the family. So, but yeah, so that was, in my opinion, the most emotional scenes in this film, and it sucks to have lost Guy Gett, but we also lost Suge. So going back to that scenario, Suge went to ambush Titus, and Suge took too long. She took too long talking, giving her whole speech about what she was getting ready to do instead of doing it, and she got killed too. Unfortunately, she did take out Titus, but unfortunately, we see her die. And I was thinking to myself, when is the last time I saw a film with Vivica Fox dying like that? Like, I guess it would have to be Set It Off. I don't know if there's been others, but in my opinion, like, at the last film that I personally seen with Vivica Fox being killed is Set It Off. So I was like, dang, not again, not again. That was my bonnet, y'all. But anyway, I also like the good cop, bad cop situation between Detective Joe and Detective Mike. Again, Detective Joe was played by the actor Darius McCray. I appreciate the balance, because if we only had Detective Joe and he's going around, he's an evil cop beating up everybody, and he's attempted to steal this money from these criminals, then I feel like it just would have been so dark. It wouldn't have been any hope for Gina and Bria and all of them. But because we had Detective Mike, it brought that balance to it all when it came to having that good cop, bad cop scenario. And we see in the end that Detective Mike is there to assist with saving the day of Quadir and his mother being captured by Terrell and his sidekick. And we have, the fact that Detective Joe takes Gina, or Gina takes Detective Joe to the house anyway, because she's like, you wanna know where the money is? Come with me. Like, let's go. And so I feel like if it was not for Detective Mike, things that occurred at the end of the film in that house in Quadir's original home would have went completely opposite, and chances are Quadir would have been killed because he was tied up, and so would his mother. And it was interesting, you could clearly tell Quadir was nothing to play with. Even as Terrell had him and his mother tied up, you could clearly tell, but at the same time, it definitely showed the human side of Quadir. While in the first film, I'm like, oh goodness, Quadir is so untouchable. He's gangster, he's all of these things, but he's also human. He wanted out of the game. He wanted to get away from all of this stuff. It was Jarrell, as he puts it in the third film, that was like pressuring him to put him on to that stuff. And if it almost sounded like Quadir was, I guess Quadir was looking out for what he had built. Even though Quadir wanted to get out of that stuff, he also was looking out for what he had built, because had he just given it over to Jarrell hot-headed behind, he pretty much anticipated that Jarrell was going to destroy it. And even though Quadir wanted no longer to be a part of the game, I don't think he wanted to see what he had built destroyed either. And Jarrell was just too high-headed, too eager, needed to have sat down somewhere. Otherwise, what happened to him at the end of True to the Game 2 would have never happened. And of course, there was a point where Quadir finally got to tell Terrell, like, hey, I'm the one that beat your or killed your brother with my own bare hands. And their fight was good. But we do see in the end Terrell is able to get the upper hand on Quadir and put the gun to Quadir's head, and it is actually Gina who saves Quadir's life by getting her hands on a gun and taking out Terrell before Terrell was able to take out Jarrell. So I feel like in this film we saw Quadir for the human side of himself, or at least me personally, who looked at him like a superhero in the first film and even the second film when he came along. But he was a lot more vulnerable in the third film, a lot more laid back, and yeah, I don't know, it wasn't what I expected. But again, it just wasn't what I expected from the Quadir of the first film to the Quadir of this third film. And I guess in a way he's still physically healing too. I don't know, it just wasn't what I was expecting. So for me personally, I was just expecting to see more of Quadir kicking butt and going up against all these people. But in my opinion, it all worked out. Those who were involved in taking each of these people out, like Salim, Titus, and Terrell, I feel like it all worked out. I feel like it all went the way it should have went according to the way it was written. So, whatever. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. Also, I see the reality TV star Tommy Lee was also a part of this film, just for a hot second as Salim's girl or whatever. She's like sitting behind Salim eating a lollipop or something. I can't remember, y'all. There was a couple of times it was hilarious with Salim's acting, because of the fact that there was like slow music playing in the background, which I thought was funny, like romantic slow music. Anytime he was getting ready to do something vindictive, I was like, really? So I thought that was interesting, the way they put that together in this film as well. But yeah, that's True to the Game Part 3. I'm not, sorry I didn't go verbatim and exactly in order, but those were just things that stood out as highlights to myself when it comes to this film. This film was directed by David Wolfgame. It was produced by Manny Haley as well as Rodney Turner II and Manny Haley's wife Yolanda Haley, and it was co-produced by the author herself who inspired this whole film, and that is Terry Woods. So that is it. That's really all I have to say in regards to this discussion. Again, I don't really have I didn't want to go verbatim and take up too much time, but in the end, it was a great film. It just did not meet what I was anticipating to get from the wrap up of this third film. And it kind of has me feeling like, can y'all make one more? Just one more. But a lot of the main characters are gone now. So I guess there is no point unless they do some sort of spinoff with Dalvin and Bria. So anyway, that is it. Let me know what you all think in the comment section. Let me know if you were satisfied with this ending. Let me know if it met your expectations or not. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.